Before we start the show, let me thank you for clicking onto this video. If you'd like to see more videos like these, why not subscribe and hit the bell button so you'll never miss an episode. Now, on with the show.
One mark will be vehicle comprised of warrior women.
Hi friends, I'm LJ Jarvis, and welcome back to Will's Jarvis Show.
Greetings everyone, welcome back to On Air with Jarvis, the podcast of all things Warhammer and general stuff I find of interest. Join us today is the voice actress and memester, Voice Quills. How's it going, ma'am?
Yo, yeah, it's going pretty good. Just been kind of taking it easy today. Probably gonna record some more stuff later on, but my niece is round, so I'm gonna have to be careful she doesn't end up getting caught in the background, because she's very loud. I'll put it that way.
Well, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. And yeah, I'm doing good at my end. I survived COVID, and that wasn't a fun experience.
No, God, no. It never is.
And you know what? Here's the thing. I have 4 vaccine shots, and on my trip to England, I didn't wear my mask once, or at least I didn't have to. And, on the bus, on buses, on the subway, and on our flight home, we didn't need to wear a mask. But just last week, I got COVID. And it's like, what happened?
Yeah, it's honestly kind of crazy how quickly everyone in the UK kind of just gave up wearing masks.
Oh, I know. This was like, this was last year in October. I didn't get COVID, but I just got last week.
Okay. Oh, it's like, so you were out in like the US with a mask and still got it, but when you're in the UK without one, you were fine.
Oh, I didn't go to the US. This was at home in Canada.
Oh, right. I don't know why I thought you were in the US. I think I just kind of assume everyone I meet is like in the US because everyone ends up assuming the same of me.
Everyone's like that with me. It's like, don't assume.
Yeah. So yeah, okay, so you're around Canada with a mask the whole time and then caught it, but when you're in the UK, you didn't get it.
Even at home, everyone stopped wearing masks, and
yeah,
it's just, to me, the whole thing was sort of over. But as soon as I caught it last week, I was like, crap.
Yeah, it's sadly a little too deeply rooted in now to really kind of wash over.
And I got the worst experience on Friday. I didn't get any sleep that night.
Oh, were you just up coughing the entire time?
Nah, I got things like chills, then I got hot.
Ooh.
Yeah, then I kept blowing my nose every few minutes, even with Tylenol.
Oh, God.
Though, I will admit, I don't think COVID was the worst thing I ever had, because 4 to 5 years ago, I had this really, really bad fever.
Just like on its own, it was like the flu or anything?
I don't even think it was the flu. It was just a really bad fever that I just got.
Oh.
I have no idea what it could have been.
Weird.
And it's like, even my coworkers were like, maybe it was COVID and you just didn't know. And it's like, well, this was 2018 to 2019. So if it was COVID, how come no one else got it?
Yeah. Plus, COVID didn't even really pop up until like mid 2019?
Around 2020, yeah. At New Year's.
Yeah. Yeah, because like it started off in like China and then sort of slowly started there and then it ended up just exploding all across the world.
Yeah, exactly. And even when the whole thing was happening, I was like, hey, Dad, I think maybe you should get some, wire toilet paper just in case I hear things going on the internet. And he's like, no, Lewis, nothing's going on. Get off the internet. Everything's going to be fine. Then a few weeks later, he's bringing home toilet paper and water.
Yeah, that was kind of wild to see. I remember going around the shops around here and there was just nothing. Like all the toilet paper gone. There was like all like the big packs of water were gone. Jesus Christ, people, like I know it's bad, but like you don't need to like prep this hard. You can leave some for someone else.
And it's like, I felt like that guy from the TV show Chernobyl when he's telling the directors, I think I see the core. I think the core is exposed. And they're saying, no, you do not see the core exposed. And it's like, but I see it. No, you don't see it.
Are you stupid?
There's no war in Bossing Say. Though, with all honesty, that was such a good show, wasn't it, Chernobyl?
Oh yeah, like it's one of those shows that like I've basically seen everything from it, but not actually sat down and watched the show because I think it's on HBO Max, isn't it?
It was on Gray for a while, but then it got on HBO Max. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't have that, but I've watched a bunch of like the clips and stuff from YouTube, and like the compilations and like bits and pieces, and it's from everything I've seen of it as a show. I mean, the acting is phenomenal. There was one scene I saw, and I think the video got taken down. I've never seen it been uploaded again. Maybe just my searching is awful. But it's that scene where I forget the actor's name. Is it Stefan Skarsgård? Is that his name?
Describe the character. Maybe I might know him.
He's the guy who like starts off as the very like pro-government, like, yeah, no, you're all full of shit, like everything's fine, and then he becomes almost like the hero and comes around and is like, yeah, no, like this is bad and we need to do something.
I do know his I do know his first name was Boris.
But yeah, it was Boris. Yeah, I think it was Skarsgård. Yeah, that's it. That's the actor. Sure, right? Yes, it is. God, it looks so different actually in a bunch of these photos. But yeah, it's the phone scene.
Yeah, that's right.
Propaganda number.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good scene. Yeah.
And he like smashes the phone to bits, and you hear him like raging in this little cabin. And he walks out just trailing like the circuit board of the phone attached to the wire.
Yeah, and I saw the whole series when it first came out. Right after Game of Thrones, and I was like, wow, this redeemed TV because the final for Game of Thrones was just awful.
Yeah, God, I kind of dropped off Game of Thrones around season 4. Not out of any like, oh, I don't like this anymore. I just kind of lost interest.
Mhm.
And then had just kept up vaguely just what people were saying across time. And then, yeah, I heard as it went on, basically from like then onwards, it just got worse and worse and worse writing wise.
I was sort of in denial about the whole thing.
Yeah.
But then
when you've got a show that big that like is doing so well, the fact that the writers sabotaged it just
It was sort of like the fireworks show that was promised to going to happen is going to be spectacular, but then when it does happen, I was like, oh, that wasn't much.
Yeah, I think this wasn't it. The writers D&D, they were offered a position writing for a Star Wars show, and they were like, all right, nice, we'll just finish up Game of Thrones then. And they just like basically wrote the ending in like a week or something. Like, all right, cool, that'll do, we're off to write Star Wars. And then when the show came out and everyone saw that they got fired for the Star Wars job. So,
and from what I heard, it's like supposedly they were like, well, we're out of books, now we're going to target the show for like people who watch Super Bowl.
Yeah, why? Don't get it. I don't get it. This keeps happening with all sorts of media, like with games and stuff. Like Silent Hill is a big example because like I've only played Silent Hill 3, but I am a big fan of the series. It's just that I've already seen everything, like all the twists and turns, and then the rest of the games. And it's like Silent Hill 1 was like lightning in a bottle. Like, just came out of nowhere, really. It was a team of pretty much outcasts from Konami, and the execs wanted a like Resident Evil game, right, of their own, and then they made Silent Hill, which people loved. And then Silent Hill 2 came along, and they still had a lot of creative freedom, and Silent Hill 2 is, to a lot of people, the best game in the series, bar none. It is like the bar for what a Silent Hill game should be. Then Silent Hill 3 came out, and it's great, it's fantastic, but there's a bit too much Konami exec meddling in it to make it like superb as a game.
That sounds exactly like the Dead Space games.
I don't know. I haven't played the remake.
Yeah, me neither, because I don't have a PS5, but I haven't even played Dead Space 3. But from what I heard from reviews, it's like, yeah, they gave up on survival horror, and they had really good ideas for Dead Space 3, but then they're like, oh well, let's make this an action game.
I think I'm one of the few people who defends that decision, because like, so Isaac Clarke starts off the first game as just an engineer. He has no combat experience. He's not a soldier. He's just an engineer here to fix a ship and see if his girlfriend's okay. And then everything goes wrong. Dead Space 2, he's in a mental hospital because of all the stuff he's seen, has messed with his head so badly, which is fair given everything he saw. And it leaned a bit more into action, but still had plenty of like dread and scares and like a lot of good atmosphere.
A lot of mental horror stuff, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of like really crazy scenes like that were really well done. And then Dead Space 3 came along. And I think at that point, you can't really expect Isaac to be like super scared or like as on edge as he was all the time in like 1 and 2 because he's been through so much. I think he's just tired at this point. Like, I think it's fair to transition more towards an action game when it's the same character across all games. Like, look at Resident Evil. Like, the first game is like a horror game, and so is like the second, and then the third's a little more actiony, and then the fourth's a lot actiony, and then the fifth one's just pure action.
Is that really a great example, though? Because from what I've seen, the Resident Evil games aren't that good anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as more 7 and 8 are like back to the... Well, then again, from everything I've heard, 8 kind of falls into the same pitfall if it goes more and more actiony. But then calling it a pitfall, I don't know. I think when you have a horror game and it's using the same lead character constantly, having them still be super afraid all the time doesn't really fit. When, especially if like a lot of the stuff they're facing is similar to what they've already been through, there can be like trauma and stuff that makes it difficult, and you still can have scares. I just think the transition from Dead Space going from horror survival horror to thingy like to more of an action game makes sense. I can see it. I can see the arc of Isaac's character. I just don't like how they ended it, how they had the true ending of the game in a DLC. Yay!
And
why?
And transactions.
Yeah, that I didn't get that because you could totally play the game fine without buying any of the resources from the shop. That was just greed. That was just straight up greed.
And then what happened? Callisto Protocol was announced, and then Dead Space Remake came out, and everyone expected Callisto Protocol to be the new Dead Space, and it turns out to be a failure.
So I'm a big fan of a YouTube channel called JT Music, and they make a lot of like raps and songs about like video games and stuff. And they did one for the Callisto Protocol.
Oh, I think I know this. I know that channel, yeah.
Yeah, they do like a lot of really good stuff. I listen to a lot of my friends when we're writing stuff for like our like tabletop worlds and stuff, and characters like, oh, this fits this character, and like, oh, this could like be like these two like going against each other. Which we do for all types of music, but JT Music does great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh hey, this like the Callisto Protocol thing, what if it's about this character that's from like your background? And then I ended up making a whole like one shot out of it. And then I thought, you know what? If I'm gonna do this, I should play the Callisto Protocol and see what it's like. Because I'd kind of be down for like a new Dead Space style thing. And I'd already heard some things of like, it gets boring pretty quick, the combat's not so good, the stories, and I played it through, and I thought, all right, I'll play it, see how I like it, and I sat and beat it in one sitting, right? Screw the fact I had work in the morning. It was, I think, a solid 6 out of 10. Not amazing, not groundbreaking, but a solid game. I think I had one crash the entire time, which, fair enough, crashes just happen. Even in the most stable of games, crashes happen. So that's fine. I can forgive one crash. The combat, when you first do it, is fun. But it's the exact same throughout the entire game. And all the weapons basically do the same thing. So the combat is, guy will go to swing at you. You hold either left or right. Doesn't matter. There's no like, oh, he's swinging like from my right to my left. I should dodge to my right and then like dodge the punch. No, it doesn't matter if you do left or right. It's just as long as you keep doing back and forth, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can melee them, and then it brings up like a little like Fortnite or Rust little like weak spot marker, and you just hold right click aim and it like snaps to it and you shoot and it does more damage.
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, it's pretty dynamic. That's like, you know, it's pretty actiony. I can work with this, you know. But then when you're fighting 2 or 3 people, it becomes a mess. They're just all over the place. The camera's kind of wonky, and there's nothing different about the weapons. It's what makes me so sad. Like in Dead Space, you've got the plasma card, you've got the line gun, you've got the rip saw, you've got like all these different weapons that are good for different scenarios, have different like usages, right? So like the plasma card, you can rotate it up like vertical or horizontal.
You basically sorry if I could say one thing. basically you can just play Dead Space with just a plasma cutter and you'll be good.
Yeah.
That's such a great
and you could do
weapon.
the same with Thingy. You could do the same in Callisto with like the starting pistol. Like you could totally. If anything, that's probably a good idea because I found the more weapons I had, the more I had to keep switching because I didn't have any ammo for the guns I actually liked because it would just drop for the other stuff. Because there's like 2 different shotguns, and all that really changes is one of them has more ammo than the other. And that's kind of it. They're all just guns. They're not even like, oh, this is a reworked mining tool or like anything. They're all just guns.
Oh yeah.
Which is boring. But I fought the final boss and I died a few times because it's kind of a weird fight. Like they basically only have 2 bosses in the whole game.
Oh.
But one of them, I forget what they call it. But it's basically these 2 guys fused together. It was in some of like the trailers and stuff. When you fight it, it's like this, holy shit, this is like the big boss. You fight it, it then splits in 2, and then you fight like the one half that's still alive. And then you find another one later on. And it's like, okay, all right, well, the boss now becomes the mini boss. That's a thing that happens in a bunch of games. I can work with this. And it splits the other way. The other half is the one that fights you this time when you beat it down a bit. Like, okay, that's cool. And then you meet the same boss again. It's like, oh, you guys only made one of these, didn't you? And then just they did 2 versions. And then the final boss, I was losing it. Me and my friend were just like absolutely dying in our seats because one of the only guns I'd ammo for left after like fighting this far was the assault rifle, which is a 3-round burst. And this big boss, who I'm so sorry, Sam Witwer, you were wasted on this role because he's the guy who voices like Maul and Anakin in the Star Wars like animated shows.
Oh wow!
Right? He is fantastic voice actor. And he does a good job. It's just the dialogue is kind of shitty. It's a really like the story is not great. When you shoot him with the assault rifle, and it's like pew 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 pew. They don't have like a buffer for hurt noises, so it's just like loop over each other. It's really stupid. I don't know how that got missed.
Oh man.
But, it's a 6 out of 10 game. If it's on sale, I would say go for it if you're looking for kind of an action-y game, but the one thing that annoyed me especially was when I looked through like, okay, there's a season pass. All right, that's kind of expected these days with games. Well, let's see what's got. And then like look through it. And it was like, oh, like 8 new death animations and a permadeath mode. And it's like, why is this in the season pass? Why should I pay for more content that should have been in the game? And then apparently that stuff's free. That's just going to come whether or not you buy the season pass. But that should have been on launch. Why are you hiding all this stuff from us? Come on.
It's like
stupid.
It's like not even something that sounds like something EA would do, but it's not even an EA game.
Yeah, I don't get why. Like, it could have been so good as well. And I think they tried to do basically both a Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2 story in one. So I'm assuming you don't care for spoilers.
I don't care.
Okay, spoiler warning for anyone listening. I'm going to talk about ending stuff for the Callisto Protocol. So basically, this like prison colony on Callisto, the moon of Jupiter, turns out is built on top of another colony that failed because it turns out there was this weird giant alien that lived under like the ice and like the like some underground like lakes and rivers and shit, and they killed it. And it turns out it's got a bunch of these little parasites in it, and these parasites are what make the people into like infected zombie weirdos. But initially there was someone in the colony who, rather than become this like mindless like zombie, basically became superhuman. They looked all weird and messed up, but they had like superhuman strength and speed, and then they got killed by bullets, and then burned. So like, we've ruined the one sample we have. Hey, I know, we're going to go and set up a prison colony and use this as a big experiment to try and find another one of these, like, subject alphas, they call it, which I always cringe whenever things do. Like, come on something a little more original, please.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through, and the whole thing has been set up, and this biochemical attack on Titan, or Europa? I think it was Europa. It turns out was accidentally, quote unquote, caused by your character because you delivered some of these parasites there on your last job, and now you're coming back here to basically pick up and drop off more. and then it's all revealed that it's for like this weird shadowy like Illuminati group called the Syndicate is like doing it to guide human evolution and to make us better even like out in the stars. Even though we're on a moon of Jupiter, we're already out in space. I don't see why we need to do this. And then at the end, there's only one escape pod, and you shove Danny, that's her name. You shove her in there, and you like sneak on like the sample that you stole of like the parasite to show, hey, this is what these people are up to. And you like fight off like the few of these guys who are coming to like stop her. The escape pod launches out, she gets away, and you think that's it. The guy turned out who like all game was showing that he'd been imprisoned against his will and he had done nothing wrong. Turned out had caused all these tragedies and was the reason why everything was going wrong. He's redeeming himself by allowing the woman who can make things right get away, and he's sacrificing himself. Yeah, and then the doctor who you talk to and like helps you a bit to the last of the game appears in a hologram, and it's like, hey, like Jacobs, we can get you out of here. And then there's a jump scare, and that's it. And it's like you could have just left it. You didn't need to cliffhanger us. You could have just left it, and it would have been a good story. Not amazing, not like groundbreaking, not genre defining, but it could have been good. And that would have been it. But no, you had to sequel bait us, and you had to try and tie in a Dead Space 2 style government conspiracy. If you just made it fucked up and left it there, that would have been cool.
And it's like, with something like the Protocol game, I don't know, it's like, even if it's okay, I think people just expect it better, especially with the whole build-up.
Yeah.
Because imagine if Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal were advertised to be the next big thing, only for it to turn out to just be like Call of Duty.
Yeah, no, that, God. Thank God.
Yeah, you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's, like, I didn't really get caught up in the hype for it, but I was interested. It did look like it could have been something different. And I think it might have set itself up for failure somewhat with trying to thingy it to bring up like it's the new Dead Space. I think if it tried to be more of its own thing, but then again, it's easy marketing, like from the creators of Dead Space, here's this new thing. I think it would have been easier if they'd not done that, but I totally get it marketing wise, how they would think that would get more sales.
But then a Dead Space remake came out, and it turns out to be the best thing from what I've seen.
Yeah, it looks like it's doing really, really well. I've not played it. I've seen some people complain that Isaac now has a voice and like says things in this.
It's the same actor.
Like, yeah, it's the same guy. I do think that they changed his face.
They did.
Which I don't know, feels weird because I think they've made it more like the original, because they changed how Isaac looked from 1 to 2 to make him look more like his voice actor.
They've done something. Yeah, they do that. Yeah, they've, like, a lot of the characters in the game do represent their voice actors. That's why Nicole looks like she's in her 40s in the new game or in the remake. But that just means that Isaac likes older women, and it's like nice.
Yeah, that's based.
Nice.
Yeah. And like it's I
this game's woke. The game's woke. She's in her 40s.
Yeah, I saw as well. The thing is, people were complaining. There's a bit of graffiti somewhere on the Ishimura.
Yes.
It's like, this ship is like a capitalist hellhole. Like, this is awful. It's like, wow, they really stuck this in. This is woke. And then this is in the original. This is in the fucking first game.
I didn't even know it was an original. And I was like, okay, I was wrong. I didn't say it was woke, but I was like, oh, did they really have to add that in a new game? But I was like, okay, if it was an original, then okay, I was wrong. Yeah. I just didn't know.
Yeah. It's like I mean, I could definitely see miners are the most like pro-union people I think I've ever thought of. Like, there's no one who's gonna be more like capitalism is full of shit. Like, this is just awful. This is just terrible working conditions.
But there's this piece where whenever Isaac runs out of ammo in the game, he'll like curse off the tools like CPC piece of shit. Talk about like the EarthGov, the tools and all that. And considering how I work in a garage, that's the most, mechanic engineer thing to do, cursing off your tools and manufacturers, even though it's not their fault.
Yeah. It's a good idea. That's like a lot of thingy to it, a lot of character to it, I think. So
it's like, my socket breaks. I'm like, I'll snap on piece of shit. That's a tool company. If people who I'm not sure if Snap-on's like outside of Canada or North America,
I
but
don't recognize the name, but I know there's a UK thing for Snap-on. Maybe my dad knows it more because he does like industrial stuff, so he probably have heard of them.
yeah, I'm just saying it's like that's the most mechanic thing to do for Isaac to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just weird that we're in a timeline where the Dead Space remake turns out to be much better than Callisto Protocol, even though it's supposed to be the other way around.
Yeah, I'm always kind of dubious about remakes because depending on who's working on it, I think Bluepoint have never really missed with their remakes of games. Like, they always look better, run pretty well as far as I'm aware, and do great. It's just that they're always like PS5 exclusives. But I don't know. I feel like there might be a chance of like the original magic being lost. So I actually didn't know what the ending of Final Fantasy VII was until recently because I've not really been a big Final Fantasy fan.
Mhm.
But after hearing it, I'm not going to bring it up just in case other people like were thinking it because like want to see it. I'm a little worried for the people who are playing it that they change the ending in the remake and make it and basically kind of ruin the message of the game. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So hopefully it all turns out okay.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, besides the intro, for the audience who may not be familiar with you or your work, who may be Quills for the audience in the back?
Yeah. Hi. I am Voice Quills. I am a voice actor. I now occasionally only on YouTube I post voiced over memes similar to like Gianni Matrigrano, Luke Correa, Tom Shaw, Garrett Schreiber. There's so many of us now actually that do it.
You're basically your own genre of YouTubers now.
Yeah, it's started to become like its own thing, which is really cool because there's a bunch of like really great people who do it, and there's people like Solid JJ who does like entire skits, like a whole like multi-minute like comedy skits with like old like DC and Marvel characters.
Yes, I love his videos.
They're utterly fantastic. I think legitimately the best among all of us. I think the rest was like see a meme like yeah, it's funny. I'll voice over it, but he's out there writing entire skits. It's fantastic. But yeah, I do the YouTube thing. I voice act in a couple of things. Mainly like little bits and pieces, like other people's videos. I am the twins in They Speak from the Abyss, which is like a kind of I don't want to say dungeon crawly, but like definitely like a sort of turn-based RPG first person kind of dungeon crawler, kind of, but not really. It's really cool. It's a fantastic game. The demo is out. You can play it now, and you can hear my little snippet. And then a couple of little indie things that I can't mention, not because NDA, but just because they're not out yet, and I don't want to like thingy it in case they don't come out, which happens sometimes. Because there's some things I did the voice acting for like a year or two ago, or like a year ago at least. And I've not heard a single thing since. So I'm like, is this still happening? Like, is this gonna come out one day? And yeah, and then there's a one audio drama, Ritual 6, which hasn't come out yet, but yeah, just a lot of stuff I'm in right now I can't really say too much about. So yeah.
Oh, that's actually really cool, especially doing all these indie games. That sounds really exciting.
Yeah, it's been fantastic because I've managed to like do a lot of different stuff. Like one of them is heavily underwater. And like so there's most of it's like I'm speaking while I'm in like a scuba suit of some kind. And at the end I come out, I'm like, oh my god, I made it. And then like I get dragged back into the water and then being like drowned. And I had to like, how do I do this? Like, how do I voice this? Like, I noticed I had still have my glass of water on my desk. So I just like tilted my head back and like kind of put the mic above me, put some water in my mouth and just gargled it while screaming to give it that like drowning effect. And it was great. I think I recorded a video of me doing it, and you could just see this big of it come out of my mouth and just soak the front of my shirt.
Epic. But Yeah, so what did get you into doing voice acting and doing these kind of videos?
God, so for years as a kid, I liked just doing like accents and impressions and stuff. None of them were good. But I had fun doing it. And then like doing voices and stuff for like D&D and that kind of thing with friends, I always found fun. And then it was kind of like a stroke of luck. So there's a streamer I'm friends with called Miabyte, and she was doing like a community kind of Among Us stream. So, and I said, "Oh, hey, I'll jump in," because like we kind of got to know each other for a bit. I jump in, and it was just as she was ending, just as she was like, "You know what? No, we're gonna wrap it up." I was like, "Ah, damn!" But I still hung out in voice chat for a little bit, and she was going through like, "Oh, thank you, X for joining us," and da da da. And then she got to, and thank you, like Antonio Greco, who is the voice of Era in Warframe, and I was like, "Shut up! No way! No way!" And he was like, "Is this a bit? Like, is this a joke I don't get?" And I'm like, no, I genuinely didn't know it was you. Oh my god, you were great. You were fantastic. Oh my god. And I shot my PM afterwards. And I'm like, yo, like it was fantastic to meet you. I loved your work in Warframe. I've been kind of wanting to get into voice acting, so like just as a little thing. So I thought, hey, it would be great if like you could help me. And he was totally down, and he ended up becoming essentially my mentor, like, and kind of taught me a load of stuff, pointed me to a lot of good resources, pointed me to a set of classes, which I took a couple of from Victoria Atkin, who is the voice of, I forget her character, but she's one of like the side characters in Horizon Zero Dawn, and she's Evie Fry in Assassin's Creed Syndicate.
I haven't played those games.
But yeah, so she's voiced a bunch of stuff, like full on professional, full time. She's also Lena in Dota Dragon's Blood. So yeah, Victoria does a load of different roles, load of fantastic stuff. And I ended up going to her classes, and that really sort of kickstarted it. I started doing YouTube stuff. And then the YouTube stuff really took off, which was kind of scary because I think it took me like a year to go from like 30 subs to like a couple thousand, and it took a year from a couple thousand to 200,000. So it's like, oh, okay, all right, you guys kind of like this. All right, I see.
Then someone like me who's been trying to reach such numbers, see someone do that in about a year, and I'm having the Homelander sort of meltdown, looking at his phone like,
it's
fuck.
It's weird. Honestly, the algorithm is kind of what did it, because while I do admit there's been a definite improvement in the quality of my work and my voice acting overall, there are some videos that I poured my heart and soul into. It's like, you know what? I just really want to do this. And it got nothing. And then there's somebody like, yeah, I'll just put out a thing about an anime girl just making fart jokes or whatever. I don't know. And it gets hundreds of thousands of views in a day. I'm like, I don't know what you people want. I don't know. Like, the lazier I am, the more it works. This shouldn't make sense. Why is this happening?
That happens a lot. And sometimes, this is something I've done a lot of times as well. You put a lot of heart and soul into something you want to make really good. You think it's going to do very well, only for it to not turn out as you think it would. And it's like, well, that's just happens,
Yeah.
And I do know that subscriber numbers shouldn't matter, so long as you're enjoying the stuff you do. And I get that. So not to make myself sound greedy or anything like that from that Homelander joke.
Yeah, because it's a tough one. Like, especially when like a lot of it is based on essentially algorithm luck. Like it's really annoying to try, and it's really hard to break out and get started with it, but it's kind of is what it is when you're making content online.
Like if you really want to please the algorithm, you would do like reaction videos or FNAF playthroughs.
God.
Hmm?
Oh god, just FNAF videos. Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier.
Though honestly, I think, though to be realistic, I think those videos sort of died out like in maybe 2 to 3 years after the FNAF hype. It's because it's sort of like how when AVGN became a big thing, then everyone believed, oh, I can do that. And no, they realized you need charm to be AVGN.
I think it's like, there's also a thing about, there's been a big change in like, YouTube's general thing for gaming videos. And it much more prefers now like fully like the full experience, or even like if it's a really big game, like a chunk of the experience, but highly edited. You can't really get away with what like PewDiePie and Markiplier and all did years and years ago, where like you fire up a game, you record yourself playing it, you cut out any like boring parts, and then just fire it up, and it's like, hey, here's your like 10-minute thing of me running around an Amnesia custom map. Like, though that kind of content just doesn't really work anymore. You kind of need the lots of editing, lots of like cutting through to the exciting bits, and yeah, a lot of that like charm and kind of presence as a creator. It's kind of, I think some people kind of, and this isn't me like directly shitting on anyone or like throwing shade. It's just I think some people still kind of are stuck in the mindset of like that old YouTube days of like what they enjoyed as a kid, and are trying to recreate it now, but it just isn't there anymore. The game has changed for content.
Yeah, and I get that, and I don't know. I'm not going to appeal personally to Zoomers born in 2010 because I'm sort of stuck in a mindset where I'm too old to relate to Zoomers born in 2010. Yet I'm also too young to relate to millennials because I was born in 1997. So I'm sort of like this. Oh, awesome! Because yeah, I'm just like in this weird middle child syndrome for and for eras of Zoomers, you know.
I think honestly I fall more into the Zoomer category because like God, what is it? You know, it's that one guy .tt on TikTok, the one, you know, who did the like Are You Ready? Like friends on the other side.
Oh yes,
like,
yes.
So he did like there's the super stretchy mouth and all that, and he like flips around the room. I could sit and watch that guy for hours. It's just like Coco Melon for me. I could just like, because something in my like Zoomer addled like brain is just like yes. Fast content, lots of noises, me like.
Yeah, okay, I'll admit I'll watch videos like that from time to time, but then at the same time, I'll listen to a Martin cartoon and it's like, oh, it's too loud, turn it off, it's too loud. It's like the characters are being too loud. It's like, oh. I'm talking like I'm in my 40s, moving on. But, so yeah, as I do with every guest on a show, I am curious as to your experience to Warhammer and what was your first exposure like and the impact was. Because, you know, this is a Warhammer podcast after all. I have to remind myself.
So, God, how old would I be? I must have been somewhere around 11 or 12 years old. And I was on Xbox playing with some friends on Xbox Live. And one of them brought up that he had found this game that was super cool, and it was like, I can't remember the way he described it to me. I'm pretty sure he says something along the lines of like, it's like fantasy but in space, and you get to shoot orcs with big guns, and there's these space marines. It's like, oh shit, this sounds dope. And he was talking about Dawn of War 2. So next time I was in the shop, I like thingy went by like the game aisle, and there it was, Dawn of War 2, the complete edition with Chaos Rising. And I got my hands in it, and I installed it on my old shitty Toshiba laptop. And I was getting about 3 seconds a frame. Not 3 frames a second. It was about 3 seconds between each frame. It was really bad. And then like it took me like, I think like an hour to do like the intro mission to Chaos Rising, because that ending holdout scene, the explosions were like taking like 6 seconds to happen.
Oh man,
it was awful. It was terrible. So when I said this to my friend, he was like, "Oh, like there's like a tabletop version you can play, and you get to like build the models yourself." Like, oh shit, that sounds great. So I googled it, found the nearest store. It was about like half an hour away, and then like asked my parents, like, "Hey, can you take me to this thing? It's really cool." And I got is it the Battle for Argus Reach? It was the Ultramarine versus Orc starter bot.
Oh, nice.
I think it was the only, I remember it being like really sought after because it was the only way to get plastic Deathcopters, because the rest of them were just purely metal and weren't in production anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I all got started out, and then it kind of snowballed from there.
Now that sounds epic, and yeah, my exposure to 40K was again through video games, and everyone knows the story by now. It was through the game Space Marine, and
Oh yes.
yeah, I gotta say, I think the video games have done an excellent job in bringing a new wave of Warhammer fans, and especially with characters or chapters in this case like Blood Ravens in the Dawn of War games. Because, yeah, it was Dawn of War, I think, that brought in a new generation of Warhammer fans, yeah?
Yeah. It like I remember the sales numbers apparently for 40, because for the longest time Fantasy outsold 40K, and then Dawn of War came out and 40K shot to first place like overnight.
Yeah. It has really done an excellent job in portraying the Sane, yeah? Or, depicting the Sane in game form.
Yeah, there's been good and bad video games for 40K
Oh, yeah.
especially. I feel like whenever a fantasy one comes out, it's generally has a higher chance of being better. But 40K, I think definitely the video game scene had like a huge impact on the popularity of the tabletop.
Like, definitely Total War, that that brought back to life Warhammer Fantasy, yeah?
It's how I'm so confused at why, on the cusp of it coming out, on repeating history, but for fantasy instead of 40K, they decided to do the end times and scrap fantasy. And now they're having a crawl back on their hands and knees and bring back the old world.
Okay, I sort of do know the story, and it might be a little controversial to some people, but fantasy was just not selling well. It was just not making the numbers as with anything else from Games Workshop, right? Literally, it was on life support at this point. Or at least in my point of view, from what I've heard from people.
Yeah, it was definitely the less popular of the two. I just think Thing A, if they'd held out for a little longer, it could have come back swinging with Thing A, with Warhammer Fantasy. Because a lot of people were like, oh, like, how do I get in? Like, I want to do I know that 40K's got tabletop, but like, does Fantasy have tabletop? And people had to go, no, they got rid of it. It's now Age of Sigmar. It's completely different now. And it's like, you missed out on a whole bunch of new people playing Fantasy. You know, that could have been like the new big wave, but now they've had to come back and remake it, because as popular as Age of Sigmar is, people really want to play Old World.
Yeah, there is a certain appeal to the Old World. Yeah, there is one.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Well, then again, I'm not the sort of person that ever got started with Warhammer Fantasy, because I never got a chance to. Because this was when End Times happened, when I started to think to myself, maybe I should try out Fantasy, because there are stuff I really like from it. But then they announced End Times and announced it was Age of Sigmar, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I'd already kind of stopped playing in general by the time the End Times rolled around. But I think like the first book released around when I was starting to sort of lose interest in Warhammer stuff. But like Fantasy, I guess maybe it might have just been the store I played at. There was quite a few people who enjoyed Fantasy, and like a whole range of that. Like there was a guy who was like an Ogres player. There was a guy who was like a Tonya player. I was a Skaven player.
Nice.
I think there was one dude who was like an Empire player. There was definitely a Dwarf player. So there was a definite like love for it. And there was one guy who was a Lizardman player as well, actually. And there was a definite lot of love for it, but that might have just been the store I played at, was just generally had I think it had a slightly older, like, average age than maybe other stores did. A lot of guys who were like kind of in their 40s-ish, or like in their 30s. And so that might have been why Fantasy was not more popular. 40K was still more popular, but like why Fantasy was still quite as strong as it was.
And I will admit this, and something I think Games Workshop should do when they eventually bring back like Warhammer Fantasy in tabletop form, and when they explore more of the world, because with the Total War games, we got to see stuff like Cathay, something that's only been mentioned from time to time in the books, and especially in the Godtrek and Felix books. They've done an excellent job in portraying Cathay, or Warhammer, making medieval China into Warhammer, which I think they've done very well on. But when it comes to other nations that exist in the world, like Kingdom of Ind and Napalm, Nippon, is that how you pronounce it?
Nippon?
Nippon, yeah. Those ones are horribly uninspired. Like King of
Yeah.
Ind is especially. They just say Gilgamesh and reference Hindu mythology with no shame.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, guys, you can do better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those the sad tropes of Games Workshop that a lot of their earlier works are quite racist and colonialist, shall we say, in how they portrayed some factions and areas of the world. But if they all get the Cathay treatment from like CA and get like fully fleshed out and have, I mean, even the Lizardmen had to get helped out a bit because we had like some Lizardmen names were like literally just tic-tac-toe and teeny weeny, and it's like, come on. Like, I know Warhammer's silly. Warhammer's super silly. But like, come on. You can do better than that.
It's even worse for Napalm because it's like they say Honda, Toyota, and it's like, guys, what are you doing?
Yeah, because they've got Emperor Toyota, don't they?
Yeah, I heard of that. And they literally named the sun god after a certain car, and it's like
that's bad.
Maybe that was the point, that it was meant to be a joke, but it's like, for something like Warhammer, this does not feel like Warhammer then.
Yeah, I think it's obviously fine to make jokes because like Warhammer is super silly.
Yeah.
But I think the joke needs to be like in a proper context. If the joke is just like, here's the Japanese faction, we named it after all their cars, that's just stupid. That's just bad. It's both lazy and a little racist. If it was like, because like there's been plenty of jokes around like the way the Empire runs, how the dwarves, like look at the whole dwarf thing, right?
Yes,
like,
especially the dwarf thing. Yeah.
The dwarves already, they're a bit subversive because they're more like they're from Yorkshire than Scotland, which is where a lot of people like attribute dwarves from. They're very much like Northern English, these dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the whole like that's going in the book. That became a whole meme that's going around. Like having jokes like that and referencing them in game is fantastic because that's like a cultural joke that fits that culture in the setting of the game. And you can have weird and wacky shit that's like makes no sense really and is super inefficient, but that's just what the culture's like, and that's just how things run, and that's all good. But like I said, if you're just taking, hey, this faction is inspired by this group of people, and here are these general things that people say to mock these people IRL, this is now their faction. It's like, no, don't do that. That's just bad.
It's like the Tau Empire have done an excellent job in being like Asian inspired, but also being their own thing without coming off as stupid.
Yeah, I think they've had some, and this is like just very vague memories. I do not have any solid examples, but I think early on there might have been some stuff that was a little close, but they've since like moved away from it. Because I know stuff like Commander Pure Tide is like like a Sun Tzu kind of like derivative.
He is a sort of Sun Tzu kind of character. He really is.
Yeah, like he was
Which
the
is
one who
nothing
basically
wrong.
wrote the Art of War, like for the Tau, like the whole Monka and Kion thing.
Which I don't think is, sorry, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And
no, yeah, that's totally fine. Like having a character derived from historical figures and done in a, as far as I'm aware, a like respectful way. They're not trying to say Pure Tide is Sun Tzu.
Mm-hmm.
He's just inspired by Sun Tzu, which is fine. Like there's no issue there. Like, and the Tau in general, as far as I'm aware, I've not read their like latest codex or anything, are like, for being a very kind of like Asian mecha inspired kind of faction, seem totally fine. Then again, I'm not Asian, so I can't really like say for certain if there is anything that's bad in there. But Games Workshop in general has been doing a lot better over the years and being a bit more sensitive about any kind of cultural implications about their factions.
So I have read their more recent codex, and I think they are, and this is something I think the fans have been, pointing out for years, saying that how the Tau Empire is sort of like modern day China, concerning how there is a of how they want to conquer worlds. There's more the question of submersion. I think that's how it's called. What am I going at? But my whole point is that their empire is really cult-like, and so there are references to re-education camps, stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
which I think is all right. I think it's very fitting for something like the Tau Empire because some people might not like this, but the Tau Empire aren't really the good guys. There is a subtle villainy to it.
I'm kind of sad about that, to be honest, because when they were introduced, they were like the good guys, and now they've kind of like. I feel you need to have a faction that's at least, for the most part. I mean, not every faction is going to be like squeaky clean, like the good guys in any say, but them kind of like that whole subversion of like, oh, they're actually all like mind controlled or like pheromone controlled by the ethereals, and it's all that kind of thing. It's, I don't know, you kind of need that little glimmering bit of hope that, hey, everyone's awful in 40k to kind of make the rest of it like, holy shit, everyone else is really awful. Because if everything's just really dark shades of gray, it all kind of blends into each other and becomes kind of in my opinion.
Well, what I mean is that the Tau Empire, and I made videos about this before, they're not like in your face grimdark as the Imperium of Man is, but for something like Tau Empire, to bring up Boston Say again, they're very much like that. They are like Boston Say, in my point of view, in the 40k saying, you know? Where they're not like in your face, oh, we are a medieval space empire, grimdark, everything. They want everyone to join their empire, but it's more of the question of subverting it, where you're converting humans, you know, you're segregating them into being, these are humans of the Imperium, and now you're humans of the Tau Empire. You are the human servants. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Which I think is very fitting for 40k, and I think it has that subtle evilness to it that makes me really like them. And even from their first codex, I haven't read it myself, but from what people have told me, the Ethereals, there was always that sort of shadiness to it, especially when it comes to like other alien species on how they brought them in, like the Vespids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because the Vespids are very much mind controlled in the Tau Empire.
Yeah. Plus, there's the whole the angle of if the because the Ethereals kind of just appeared during the Tau Civil War, like thousands of years ago, and just kind of just brought an end to it, and they kind of came out of nowhere because there was like the 4 different like tribes essentially. You know, there was fire, earth, air, and water. And then the Ethereals just popped up. And we're like, hey, you guys, be chill, and it all kind of worked out. So there's always been some question of where the Ethereals came from. I know that for a long time, one of the theories was that they were created by the Eldar to like bring the Tau along the right path, but I don't think the Eldar would go that far to like genetically modify / create their own like essentially vassal leaders.
I even have my own huge theory about that, about the whole idea about the Ethereals and all. Because if they were always meant to be good guys, then how come Farsight and his enclave became independent? And how come the Empire go out of their way to tell their people there's no such thing as the enclaves? This is a exclusion zone, you know?
Yeah, it's... Then again, you could always have a faction that's like, I don't know. I'm not a writer, I couldn't think of it, but it is a fair point. I mean, Farsight is... Let's be honest, Farsight is the most based in Chad of all the Tau.
Oh, he is.
He is utterly fantastic. The fact as well that he wields a literal like chaos blade, but it doesn't affect him because the Tau have like 0 presence in the warp. So,
and that leads me into this. So from all the teasers recently within Arcs of Omen, there's been hints and implications that Farsight will be getting a new model. So I was wondering about your thoughts on that.
I would be super down to see a new Farsight model, especially if it comes along with unique models for his like bodyguard, his like entourage. Because they're all like in unique like suits. There's like, I think there's one that's in like a broadside suit. There's a bunch that are in the normal XV8 crisis suits. I think there's one that's piloted basically by an AI. That is its own, like, it's pretty much sentient. It has its own thoughts and feelings, which is dope.
It is.
So having a whole new Farsight model would be utterly great. Because I don't think Was there one? I think there might have been one ages ago.
There was technically the model that we have right now, technically that's a quote unquote new model from one that existed like years ago. Like we're talking like Tau Empire released for the very first time, and they gave Farsight a new model, but it's fine cast, so it's not that great. Like I have him now, and he breaks down from time to time. And
oh yeah, I remember seeing this in the store now. Yeah,
but yeah, it'll be super dope for Farsight to get a new model. And if they were to do a new model from any of his, entourage, there are two characters I have in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one character named Brightsword, and he's a Tau with prototype, close combat swords. They're like laser blades that come out of his hands. I think that'll be very fitting for the Farsight Enclave. So if he were to get a model like that, that would rock.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that would rock. And especially if there's other Crisis Suit models that have close combat weapons because they're inspired by Farsight. Because in a way, I think the Enclaves would be growing their own culture in a sense. And I think that seeing Farsight with a sword, this will inspire like more samurai type of fire warriors,
Yeah. I mean, the Tau have always they've always sucked in melee, but having a segment of them that are like more like trained in it, even if it's like melee based crisis suits, would be like really cool.
Exactly. And also Torchstar. I'm not sure if you know this character.
Torchstar. I've heard the name. I'm sure I remember thinking Torchstar. 40k. Are they the one that's got like flamers?
Yeah, if they were to give her like some kind of special look for her crisis suit, like maybe if she has, maybe to emphasize the whole point of her having plasma flamethrowers on her suits, I think that would really, really look super cool.
Oh yeah. Of course, the moment I go, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. I'll like just refresh my memory on them, and there is a lot of fan art of her.
Yeah. Because it's the internet.
Yep. Hey, who can blame them?
And I'm not going to hide it because my new wallpaper has a Tau in bikini.
Based.
It is super based. But yeah, and speaking of arcs of Omen, because we are advancing that storyline, I am curious about your opinions on the character of Vastor since he was introduced in the first book. Even if you haven't even if you haven't read the book, just the character as a whole, Vastor.
Yeah, so he's kind of like the chaos answer to Call, isn't he?
He really is.
Like, yeah, like I kind of had a quick look up at him and like read like the little kind of blurb about him, and I'm kind of mixed. His model looks really cool. I'm a big fan of the model, but I can see it. Like the way I kind of feel about it is like it's kind of described that they're not exactly a new chaos, not even a god. They're not even like really a demigod. They're just basically a greater demon kind of deal.
Like a very powerful demon. Very powerful demon.
Yeah. They're like one step down from being like a demigod, right? They're like half demigod or something. I'm not even sure what the quarter would be, but like.
Well, in my point of view, I don't think it'd be appropriate to call him demigod, despite what Games Workshop, titled him as in the reveal trailer, because demigod would imply that he's part mortal, part god. That's more of
true.
That's more of demon prince, not something like Vastor.
Yeah, like
or at least in my point of view.
Yeah, but creating a character that like and then explains where things like the soul grinders and like the sort of more mechanical stuff came from. I guess I can see why they would do that, but I always kind of had the idea, as much as I was like, where could these things come from? I was kind of the idea that they manifested as they are, because like no one's out. Like whenever a bloodletter like spawn, they don't look around for a sword; they just come with a sword. So I always assumed that like the more mechanical parts are either things that already existed that were corrupted by chaos, or if it's just straight up a demon, it just spawned in the warp with that stuff already. Like, I know there's the whole Chaos Mechanicum and the Dark Mechanicum and, like, their whole thing of making really weird shit all the time. But making, like, a greater demon out of it and having them kind of be a arms dealer barter between the four gods feels a little kind of forced in. I think he really is meant to, like, he really is just, like, the narrative foil to Call, and, like, probably is, I don't know, my bet on the very little I know about the whole new stuff going on with the Imperium and it being split in half by the Great Rift and everything, is they're probably gonna go for like two sides of the same coin thing with Vashdor and Call, and be like both of them are basically doing the same thing, but for their respective sides. So like it's I don't know.
I can sort of understand that, and I can sort of understand like the whole, difficulty what might be to introduce a new character like him. But what I find really interesting from his lore is that he is the chaos god of innovation, creation, human drives and emotion, and eventually stuff like that do create their own deities or their own little creatures within the warp. Because we see this with like the Eldar when they created Slaanesh, purposely or not. And because of that, I think it is very interesting that because humans have always been driven to create new things, to invent new things, and with characters like Call and Fabius and all that and all that such, it would create a creature like that within the warp. And I really do like the idea that he is the sort of arms dealer with the four chaos gods. I find it to be really interesting because it reminds me a lot of it reminds me of Fabius, especially the role he plays, because he is the sort of arms dealer with the Chaos Legions, but instead of demon engines, it's with apothecaries. And this is something I'm interested in. Maybe I'll make a video about this. Is that I think Vashdor has a lot in relationship with Fabius, because Fabius has created so many things. He has created new species of humans that they basically see him as a god. And as such, maybe Vashdor might take interest in him because of his innovation, because of his creations,
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I just think, wasn't the last, like, when, with Slaanesh being born, I know that was, like, an entire, like, galactic empire basically spawning it. It usually isn't, like, the birth of a new god a very violent affair, and I feel like it wasn't the Great Rift wasn't it, because the Great Rift was caused by, like, Cadia's destruction and the Eye of Terror, like, shitting a new one across half the galaxy.
Yeah,
so...
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, go
on. Technically, there's something I have to remind myself. Technically, the gods have always existed, though by Slaanesh's birth, he basically, pushed the gods into becoming, conscience, because her birth basically ruptured the warp, basically going full swing. And that is technically true, and it also emphasizes the point that Vashdor is technically not exactly a god when compared to the Big Four, but a very, very powerful demon, in my point of view.
Yeah.
And if anything, though, I think he would have like less influence and power than the Great Horned Rat if we were to compare him to AOS and Fantasy.
Oh yeah, probably, yeah, because like the at least when it came to Age of Sigmar, I think the Great Horned Rat basically just joined the Pantheon as his own thing, where before he was like a step down from the other Chaos Gods.
He is, and he only has like one type of demon, and that's a greater demon, and it comes in different variants too. So he's not that powerful compared to the other gods because he doesn't even have his own race of demons. It's like there's no his version of Bloodletters, there's no his version of, Pink Horrors. There's nothing like that with the Great Horned Rat.
He just has the Great Horned one.
That or the, what's it called? It's sort of like a plague variant is for Clan Pestilence.
On Great Horned one. Where's the demon? Oh, what was it called? Vermin Lords. That's what they were called.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think that might be it. Unless Vermin Lord Corruptor.
That's right. That's right.
I think that'd be one. Yep. Also known as Pestilent Reapers or the Colors of Civilization. Okay, that goes hard. Yeah, there's Deceivers, Corruptors, and Warbringers and Warpseers, and then Exalted Vermin Lords.
Mm-hmm. So Fastor doesn't have something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in my point of view, I really do like the character Vastor, and if Games Workshop were to explore him in novels, I'd be very down for that.
Yeah, I can definitely see his character working, like, thinking pretty well in the universe. I think it's just a case of, as long as it doesn't end up kind of stepping on too many toes, I guess. And, like, sort of, this is the issue, yeah, whenever you have a world that's in, like, because 40k kind of suffers from being in perpetual, like, movement forward timeline wise, but the timeline never shifts. Because, like, isn't, like, the timeline still technically just, like, it's only just turned to the 42nd millennium, isn't it?
43rd, maybe, because I think the whole, because I know there was this huge change where they decide that the Indominus Crusade is still happening, like everything's still going on, like Vigilance still happens and all that, but technically that's still under the Indominus Crusade, because originally it was just going to be, oh, the Indominus Crusade just happens, or it just happened, now we're here. But they changed that. They changed it where it's still the Indominus Crusade, which I think is a huge fix, yeah. Because if it was just something mentioned in the background, nah, I wouldn't like that. It's like, why bring it up then if you're not going to show it?
Yeah, I think 40k in general has the Simpsons timeline issue. So, like, oh, who was it? I think it was Super Eye Patch Wolf's video. I think, anyway, but talking about how, like, there's an episode of The Simpsons out, like, relatively recently, which goes back to Homer being a teen in the 90s. But The Simpsons was out in the 90s, and Homer was already, like, a middle-aged guy with 3 kids, who was a teen in, like, the 70s. Like, there's a constant thing of that happening in 40k, I feel, where, like, the events keep getting stacked on top of each other, and we have to keep reworking the timeline to keep it just on the cusp of the next millennium without everything colliding in each other and characters being in 2 places at once.
Yeah, that is one of the issues, and I think people need to some people need to understand that 40k is a setting. There is no, like, grand story, I think. because the whole thing is that stories need a beginning, middle, end. Like 30k has a story, the Horus Heresy, there's a beginning, middle, end, but you can't really do something like that for 40k unless you do something like End Times, and we all know how people react to that.
Yeah,
like things.
I know when they start shifting things to, like, bringing Gilliman back and, like, the Great Rift and Cadia's destruction, it was like they had to say, no, this isn't an End Times. We're not ending it. They were just adding stuff to the story, which I think it's a good thing to keep doing that, because you end up with, honestly, the world was super stagnant for, like, years. I played it.
It was.
It's like you need to have some events to keep it forward. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, when you buy models, paint them, build an army, fight someone else, it doesn't really matter what the story is. But, like, having events keep playing out and go forward and, like, propel, like, new characters into the plot and, like, make room for things, you do end up with some bad decisions. Because as far as I'm aware, isn't Commissar Yarrick now dead, like, canonically?
He is dead.
Which I know upset a lot of people, which I can understand, because Yarrick is great. But that just adds some extra stuff for Gazgul to, like, become a thing, eh? Because I know a lot of people are memeing, because wasn't it, like, a demon of Khorne that killed Yarrick?
I haven't finished the second book yet, so of Arc Development, so I wouldn't really know. So this is new to me.
Okay, I heard rumors it was a demon of Khorne, but that might be, like, thingy. That might have just been, like, just people deciding that was the case. But like I know I saw a bunch of memes where it was like was it like a bloodthirster or whatever talking to Gazgul. It was like, you're really gonna die for like a tiny human. It's like Shumunish. Just like
Yeah.
clacking the power claw.
Yeah, that is the sort of issue that Games Workshop has to, constantly balance out with 40K. Like, I want things to happen, because you can't just have us saying in pause forever and nothing happening. Cause
Yeah.
yeah, at the same time, they have to play smart because they can't just do n times 40K, and eventually they're going to have to realize, some characters aren't going to be immortal forever. Because some people can just die of old age.
Yeah.
But there's something I actually want to ask you out of curiosity, because I think it's also poetic for Games Workshop doing this. So as of right now, the Arbites will be out. Sorry, the Arbites will be out for Kill Team. And besides how Games Workshop redesigned their models, which I think makes them look really cool and really unique, I also was really interesting that they have brought them into the tabletop game at long last after, a bit of a hiatus, because to those who probably know already, the Arbites are obviously Judge Dredd. Like, there's no hiding it. They are basically, the judges from Judge Dredd. And because Judge Dredd was such a big influence for 40K, I think it's really cool that we get to see models of the Arbites because of the, importance of Judge Dredd,
Yeah. I took a look at the new models, and I'll be honest, when I first saw them, I was like, is this like I don't know, they seem kind of bland. But the more I looked at them, the more I was like, actually, no, these actually are really cool. Like, first, it looks like a little kind of generic, but the more I look at them, the more there is actually like nice little details. Like, depending on what weapon they're carrying, there's different shoulder pads. There is obviously that very like Judge Dreddy helm they're wearing, which is a little different from a lot of the art, but as in like from like the original art pad of the Arbites. But
I think they had to do that.
Looks great.
Yes, I think they had to do that because it looked way too much like the original Judge Dredd helmet, Because the original Necrons, they were basically Terminators. Then later on, they made them into modern day Necrons as we know them now. So it was sort of like inevitable that they have to do this for like, the Arbites.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just seeing the models, like seeing that one guy with a shotgun sniper rifle, that is ridiculous, but so awesome.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a crazy decision to have an underslung shotgun on a sniper rifle. But I guess in some roundabout 40K sense, it works.
It really does work. And, I'll be honest too, like, I haven't read a Judge Dredd comic. I have a very basic understanding of the character. And my only real exposure to him was the 2013 movie. And I was like, this could be a 40K film. This feels like 40K. That was such an epic film. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. Carl Urban did an absolutely fantastic job, and it is criminal we didn't get a sequel.
If only they didn't put in the title 3D. I think that's what held it back. But yeah, I like the new Arbites models, and I think it's really cool that we see them.
Hell yeah.
Though I think another question I want to ask you to hear your point of view on. So 40K is famous for its, ocean of novels based off of characters and factions. A lot of them even getting their own book series, So with this in mind, how do you think they could do a Leagues of Votann book?
Ooh,
They are a very new faction, I know, and the only thing we have about them so far is their codex. So this does raise a question on how they could do a book series on them, or a book on one of their characters.
I think one good way to kind of, if they wanted to introduce people to it more, they could do like a kind of, not quite first contact, but after like a little bit of like first contacts happened and all that, having like a novel, say you could have it like a group of, Imperial like there's guardsmen and like diplomats and all that kind of thing meeting with the League of Votan and sort of try to like hash out some kind of deal. And then maybe you could have like maybe there's a bit of combat between the two because like talks break down, and then it turns out there's like a third faction that maybe you could have the Alpha Legion messing things up as always. Or even just throw in like, oh hey, orcs are in the system. We need to like both deal with this and actually work together and have a little bit of camaraderie between the two, but still leave it on we are very different people and we're gonna keep butting heads for a long time kind of vibe.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one interesting take that they could do is that what they could do is that we can follow like a bunch of Votan characters. These will be the typical Warhammer dwarves that we all know and love. They're isolated. They're very, very conservative with their way of life. And especially since they have technology from Dark Age of technology, which to the Imperium is probably magic for how planet destroying they are, and their industrial system will make the Mechanicus blush.
Yeah.
So I think what would be interesting is that maybe we get to see like this sort of, exhibition of Votan trying to, make contact again with an old Votan hold, or in this case, a dwarf hold that would actually reference to these squads from the very early years of Rogue Trader.
Oh yeah.
The squads that got, devoured by the High Fleet Behemoth. So if they were to make some kind of reference to that, I think that'd be very cool.
Yeah, that could work out.
If they were to like try to find some hold from a long lost Votan squad ancestry,
Yeah, no, that sounds like it'd be really good.
Yeah, I think that'd be very cool. And with them against High Fleet, if they were to have, a mini war with High Fleet Behemoth, I think that'd be very poetic.
Oh yeah, no, that could actually work out really well.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, these have to be Warhammer dwarves, because these aren't. Technically, they're humans, yes, but they are dwarves. They are Warhammer dwarves. They have to be Warhammer dwarves that we know them.
Yeah, they have to be full on rock and stone.
Exactly. So yeah, I think we've reached a good point where I can actually ask you some questions that people have asked of us. If you're all set.
Yeah, I'm all down. I think I did quote tweet the announcement where you asked for like some questions, and I think some people posted their questions there as well. So
yeah, I saw them.
Okay,
I'll though I think I got a very good amount of questions from the initial announcement. So
all right, let's rock and roll.
Sure thing. So first question is, if you could voice a character, one from 40K, one from Fantasy, and one of your choosing, which would it be?
Oh God, who would I voice? Ooh, this is actually a really tough one. If I was doing one for 40K, one for Fantasy, and then my own. Okay, so I think for 40K, I would want to voice. I think I would really enjoy voicing a Living Saint. I think that would be dope as hell. Just being super over the top, like religious lines and shit, and like while I'm like just screaming it out, being this big ass like living angel like flying across the battlefield. That'd be dope as hell. I'd love to voice that.
That would be dope.
And then Fantasy. Ooh, who's voicing Fantasy? Oh, I actually already thingied this. I I made a little like demo video of it, and I really should go back and do it again with like better stuff. I would love to voice Slivok, who is a Slaneshi greater demon. So much like to Nakari. But their whole thing is that they kind of are against Slanesh because like the whole like fantasy thing of like destroying the world essentially. Slivox doesn't want to just destroy the world and conquer it. They think it's best to keep it alive just to savor it that bit longer. Rather than like taking over and storming the world and causing the end times and everything. No. That's a bad idea. That cuts off your supply of pleasure and pain and everything. Best to just let it simmer and savor it for as long as you can.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
Okay.
one of my choosing from either. Oh, that is a tough one. Who's the third character to be down? I think some kind of like Tau commander. I think I'd be down for that. Either like one of Farsight's entourage or like even voicing Shadow Sun would be really cool.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. Maybe some type of ethereal.
Maybe. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of being in a mech suit. I'd love to be like a crisis suit pilot.
Of course. We all do.
Yeah.
And as for the next question, favorite 4K novel, and what are you reading right now?
Ooh, I'm not actually reading anything at the minute. I was tempted to pick up. I know it's not 40K, but Berserk, and start reading that. I don't think I actually have any I think all the 40K novels and fantasy novel. I actually haven't read any fantasy novels, but I've read 40K ones. I've read through them all. But my favorite has to be Titanicus, because I've read that one like 5 or 6 times, and I've got it signed by Dan Abnett as well.
Nice.
Because I met him at a games day years ago. Yeah, no, Titanicus is my favorite. I've absolutely loved that book because it's like it jumps between different perspectives of a group of guardsmen. They're like cut off behind enemy lines. There's like it follows some of the Titan pilots and like the Princeps that are fighting in these huge war machines, and the way it describes like how the fighting's going, it becomes very organic. Because like on the outside, when like you're seeing these guardsmen talk about like seeing Titans fight, and it's basically 2 like towns on legs like duking it out, and it's the noise is insane, and like the smell of ozone from the void shields, all the rest of it. It's great. But then when it swaps to the Princeps who are actually piloting the mechs, the Titans, it's a lot more like organic, and it feels more like you're reading about 2 boxers going at it, because like they talk about how when your Titan gets hit, the Princeps, because they're basically like mind melded and pilot it like a body, when they get hit, the body that's floating in this like nutrient bath thing that they sort of use, it starts to get wounded as well. There's like psychostigmatic wounds that start appearing. So like one gets like hit in the body, and they like describe the pain in a very organic way rather than like, oh, like the metal starts breaking apart. Like they describe like the pain the Princeps is going through as the pain of the Titan.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Weirdly enough, that's how I sort of imagine a, Titanicus pilot being. It's sort of like being a huge boxer and all that.
Pretty much. And they go through like it's mainly follows like there's a couple of Warhound Titans and some Reavers, and then I think there's a handful of Warlord Titans in the story, but they mainly focus on like the Reavers and Warhounds. And even then, like the scale is insane, and then there's like a huge battle with Skitarii running around. And they describe how like the Mega Bolter is just leaving mist everywhere. It's so well written. I love Titanic.
And as for me, for my favorite 4K novel, that's really hard because there's a lot of books I really do like from the Farsight books. It's really hard to pick, but I think if I were to choose a story that has left such a big impact on maybe both me and the community, I think it would have to be Hell's Reach, because that is such a great novel and such a simple story to get into for a first comer. Because it doesn't, begin a huge book series that you have to try to follow along for years. It is an independent story, and it's so simple that it works.
Yeah.
And Grimaldus is such a great character in that.
See, I haven't read Hell's Reach just because something's scratching the back of my mind. Is it like Black Templars versus Orcs? But I might be completely wrong. Nice. Okay, yeah. I was trying to think. Like, I'm sure I've seen bits of it because I know there's like a big animated movie of it on YouTube.
There is.
I've not actually watched it yet, so.
Oh, you're missing out because that's such a great story. Especially when Grimaldus does his speech, it's so powerful. It's so epic, especially with music.
Oh, I'll need to give it a read then. I need to get back into reading more stuff, to be honest. I've been denying myself books to read for a long time.
And currently right now I'm listening to the first Caiaphas Cain book, which I'm really enjoying. Yeah, it's a really funny story too. But I really got to get into this one book, which is not Warhammer related. It's called The Terror. It's about the Franklin Expedition. I'm not sure if you know of this. It's the Franklin Expedition, the failed one, where they try to go through the Arctic Circle.
Oh, right. Yeah. The one that, what is it? That show? Was it The Terror?
Yes. Yeah, The Terror.
Yes.
Yeah, I really like the TV show, and I got the book. I just have to try to, read it because I've delayed it for so long. But I have read bits of it, and it's like, wow, these characters are pretty different. But not in a bad way.
Yeah.
But moving on and onwards, if you could retcon one thing in 40K, AOS, or fantasy, what would it be? That's spicy.
That's a tough one. Okay, I think the biggest option to pick would be the end times in fantasy. I would even if say I couldn't remove the end times, right?
Make it better.
Because Skarsnik is completely forgotten. He just doesn't appear, right? The smartest gobbo to ever exist, gone, right? Just
Godsnick, yeah, I know that character. He's not even mentioned. Yeah, like you said.
Yeah, he's just and you know why? Because the writers just came out and said we forgot about him, and that was it. There's some good stuff I'd like to keep. Like I think it's Gorok, fighting in Lustria, and there's this scene where he is literally on this like mountain pile of dead Skaven, and he looks up to the sky, and I can't remember if it's just a big meteor or it's Morsleep itself is crashing down on top of him, and he just looks up and screams, and that visual is amazing. Keeping that in. The Skaven in general, from what I've heard of the end times, really just work as cannon fodder. They don't do like the scheming, backstabbing stuff that they're normally like used for. They just sort of tend to become the lackeys of the bigger chaos threat, and then just sort of disappear into like the rat tunnels of the warp when the end times actually occur. I think giving them a bit more of a, because I remember Zane, Zane Shacht, who does like other voice acting stuff and is big into Warhammer as well. He brought up an idea of having the Skaven actually be initially against chaos and siding with like the forces of order, as it were. And everyone's very uneasy about this and isn't very sure and is fully expecting the Skaven to backstab them. And they do. But they don't do it for long enough that like when like the final big battle happens, and everyone's like backs against the wall, the Skaven come in and just betray everyone and just start fighting everyone. Doesn't matter about previous allegiance. They just go in, they're fighting chaos, they're fighting the Empire, they're fighting the elves, they're fighting everyone all at once. And I think having that be like rather than just being a simple good versus evil, having the Skaven just throw in a bit more chaos, literally, would I think be a really good shift.
That would, and I think the most recent trailer for Total War actually, does something like this. Like they make the end times better, and this in the trailer,
Yeah.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, like I haven't gone to this book yet, but Gottschalk and Felix have their own, 2 books about the end times. And,
yeah.
And from what I've heard, that's been done very, very well. And it looks like they've done it very well,
Yeah, I think from what I heard, there's some very cool, like, even if it's like basically right at the end of the world, there's some very cool character development and character moments that I think as well made their way, because of the end times, into Age of Sigmar as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the characters are still around, so.
Yeah, end times is sort of like an example piece of what not to do when retiring a setting. Especially don't rush it.
Oh, yeah. Like, if you're gonna do a big, like, end of the world bang for your setting, don't just rush it out and try and, like, thingy it quickly. Take your time with it, savor it.
Especially don't, like, depend on your fans to help create your scenario. because one of the things is that they were going to have like tournaments to have the players determine what happens in the end times. And you know what players do? They go online and fake it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's one thing I could change. So this is in 40K, and this is during the Vigilance campaign when that happened a little while ago. I have this idea that instead of Calgar becoming a Primaris Marine, how about he died by Abaddon, and he's dead. He's permanently dead. And Cacho Sicarius becomes the new chapter master, but he decides to go through the Primaris Protocol, and he's the one that becomes the first Primaris Marine. I think that'd be a very a very progressive way of developing his character, where he was, very ignorant in his very early years, but then when he got trapped in the warp for a little while, he sort of became like cell-shocked from the experience. But when Calgar died, this is where he's more mature, and as a Primaris Marine, he's literally born again as the chapter master of the Ultramarines, the new Ultramarines. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I think that actually works really. Because I was thinking, like, Cal Sicarius, really, he's kind of just like a big crybaby who just talks about how great he is. But no, that actually would be like a really good character arc for him to have, to become a much less self-absorbed person.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I think that'd be a fun thing to do, and that would make a good fan fiction, I think. That would make a good fan fiction.
It could be like the thingy, like a slightly less alt history version of like the Dornian heresy.
Yeah, I do sort of do my alternate history sort of scenarios, and I think I brought up the idea in a video, which I did. I brought that up, yeah. Alternate history is pretty fun.
Hell yeah.
Okay, and so here's a little spicy question. So, when will Quill first appear in a hentai?
Oh boy.
Straight to it.
No, depending on when some things get sorted out, potentially sooner than I think a lot of people are going to think. But that depends on a few different factors, so we shall see.
But as for his serious question, do you believe both ends of the female Space Marine and 40K should join hands and just play the game with their plastic toys and enjoy it for what it is? That's a spicy little question, but what do you think?
Sorry, hold on, wait, repeat the question, sorry?
I'm sorry, do you believe both ends of the female Space Marine argument and 40K should join hands and just play the game with their plastic toys and enjoy it for what it is?
I guess to a degree, yeah. I think
that's a little controversial question.
It's a tough one. I've made my stance clear in the past that I think you could totally have an art with Call. I think Call would be crazy enough to try and make female Space Marines. And considering Primaris Marines, I believe now you don't even need to take someone when they're a kid. You can make someone a Primaris Marine regardless of age, right? Because wasn't like the old thing with Space Marines, you had to get them when they were like in their teens to then become a Space Marine. But now Primaris Marines, because of the way the procedure works, it doesn't matter anymore.
I think it's still the same, child thing. I haven't heard anything about that in a little.
Okay. Well, I figured that even then, you have an entire arm of the Imperial military called the Sisters of Battle. And I bet you there are some teenage Sisters of Battle in there that would gladly take the risk to cross the Rubicon Primaris and become essentially Primaris Sisters of Battle. You have an entire army built around women already. Why not start thinking them? And I know to some people it's like, well, that kind of ruins the point of Sisters of Battle because they're meant to be normal everyday humans that are just like, through the sheer power of faith, are made into like these nigh incorruptible like monsters on the battlefield, which is fair. Which, if that's the case, just have some of them split off, like if they're selected, and become like female Space Marines that are their own thing. And then the rest that aren't quite so suitable still get to go and become Sisters of Battle.
So I've already made my video, and people already know my point of view on the whole argument for female Space Marines. So I won't drag it too long, but I think I'll just say this, as a stance. So when it comes to the hobby and fan fiction side, do whatever you want. Yeah. It's just that I don't think it's sensible to just keep demanding Games Workshop, no, you have to do this because this will make a whole new market. And it's like, well, will it really? Because, I don't see someone going to a hobby store. They see all these different armies like, Mechanicus, demons, all this sort of stuff, but they don't get into it because there's no female in Space Marines, which people might say that, but at the same time, well, why is that the sole reason you're not into Warhammer? But then again, I'm not going to drag this for too long, but there is a smart way of doing, female Space Marines, which won't exactly make them Space Marines, right? Fabius Bile, I'm not sure if you ever read his books, but he has this, race of humans called the New Men, or the Glenhounds. Mm-hmm. And they were sort of born with sort of artificially made gene seed, where they're sort of like Space Marines, but they're lesser than Space Marines. And amongst them, there are women. And the whole point is that they're able to have kids with each other because they're meant to replace humans down the line. So in a sense, these are mass print Space Marines. They're not exactly Space Marines, but to a good degree, they're the mass print version. Version. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So in general, I'm not the sort of person who's obsessed with the arguments, because I've already made my video about it, and it's not something I'm going to focus too much on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there could be the one thing I think there's definitely more Games Workshop could do to make the general environment of 40k and fantasy more accessible and open to women in general. Doesn't need to necessarily be female Space Marines, but I think there is some work to do on that front. Though a lot of it is also community based, because I've seen a lot of women who are into 40k get a lot of shit just for being into 40k as a woman.
And some people just go way too far with the argument, where it's like, guys, on both sides, if I may say, it's like, guys, calm down, because they go way over the top, where it's not even simple debate, where it's like, are you okay? It's like, calm down. Let's calm down, guys. Okay, and moving onwards, I think. Probably an obvious one, but favorite Chaos God.
Oh, see, I'm always caught. I think I'm going to go Slanesh, which a lot of people aren't going to be surprised by, but Tzeentch is probably like second there, and a very close second. I just think Slanesh is underutilized a lot of the time, and very simplified. So like, we've already had the thing of like, Khorne is like just blood and war and like fire and destruction, but is also like a representative of survival of the fittest and like that will to get better and like martial honor. And then Nurgle, disease, rot, etc. But is also like just the nature of decay and death. And we've constantly in video games either had Khorne as the enemy, or Nurgle, or very occasionally Tzeentch was behind some weird shit. But Slanesh is like never used as an enemy, really, outside of like the Total War game. Slanesh is kind of just left, and everyone just thinks Slanesh is just, oh yeah, sexy fun time, haha. But it's about all kinds of excess. It's about greed, gluttony, whether it's like drugs, food, money, love. But at the same time, it's also hatred, pain, despair, poverty, starvation. It's the extremes of all emotion and feeling. It doesn't just need to be booba sexy. It can be grotesque and awful in all the ways chaos is, on completely different spectrum.
Exactly, and this is something I think AOS has explored, because I don't know what it's called, but it's a sort of demon-like human that's is sort of like the gluttonous sort of character, because that is one of the whole ideas of Slanesh. He/she is not just sex. It is more of obsession with food, with alcohol, stuff like that. Things that give you pleasure, but it's the warped version of it, where it's too much of it.
Yeah, it's taking it completely to the extreme.
In which desire has conquered reason,
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that would make a very cool enemy for a K game, but I don't think they'll do that because you can't mass market that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it just kind of sucks. They kind of wrote themselves into a corner when it's a fair enough thing to add to the world, like Slanesh and their demons and everything. It's just a little harder to make E for everyone,
And do not make it for E for everyone. Give it the horror M. It's good.
All out. Yeah, just go for it.
Which I think the Total War games have done a great job in, like Slanesh is in there. And that's a great representation. And
they've done a really good job with how they've handled things in Total War.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. Even though I don't even play the games. But as for my favorite Chaos God, Slanesh is very up there, right? When I've heard of her for the first time, I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. When I was reading the Chaos Space Marine Codex for the first time. But I think one that gave me the most fascination would be Nurgle, because of the absolute body horror of it. Yeah, because he is a god of decay, of diseases, plagues. There is that body horror that you definitely see within the models and in the stories and all that really creeps me out. And especially his idea that he, as the warp, is not just like corrupting mortals, it's also corrupting the environment.
Yeah.
And for him, he's corrupting the world around him. Whereas everything's like plague riddled and stuff like that. That I find really cool and dark.
Especially like that. Have you seen the video of someone put up of the Nurgle Land Raider, with, like the giant eye on it and all like the wiggling tentacles and shit?
I haven't seen that, no.
Oh, it is absolutely awful. In the best way. Nurgle Raider. Where is it? Yeah, this thing. It's so like well made, but so gross.
Oh, that's gross, but also very cool.
Yeah, it's really well done. And it has an asshole on the side.
Oh, man. But yeah, Nurgle is up there as my favorite Chaos God, but Slanesh is just right behind him.
Hell yeah.
But let's see. I'm going to look through some of the questions from your tweet. Let's see. Because I'm not going to answer every single question. I think that's something people have to understand from time to time. I can't really bring up every single question, just a good amount. Okay. Ooh, here's a good one. Eldari or Drukhari? Personal preference.
Ooh, I think I personally find it's tough one actually. I kind of like them both. And I did play both on tabletop for a while. I think the Drukhari. I think I just find them more fun. I do really enjoy the Eldar, but I do just like the fact that Drukhari are like, screw it. We're just gonna do what we want from now on. We don't need to adhere to any rules. Screw you all, and just do whatever. It's great.
So for me, I really do like the Eldari, like the craft worlders, and I especially like the different, warrior clans that exist within them. Like we see the Dire Avengers, Striking Scorpions, and all this stuff that Games Workshop has put into the Eldari from different cultures, mix them all together. I find this to be a very unique sort of depiction of space elves that we haven't seen before. And something like that looks very like mythological, something out straight from mythology that I think something like that works for 40K. And because the Eldari are more of, mythology rather than reality, or to human reality in this case, I find them to be very cool. Something alien, but also fantastical.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I really like. Though I really do like Drukhari too, especially how Games Workshop has made them into sort of like the what are these things called in Hellraiser?
The Cenobites?
They are very much like the Cenobites. Yeah, I find that to be really cool and unique.
Yeah.
Some people will associate the Cenobites with Slanesh, but I think the Cenobites would fit very well with the Drukhari, yeah?
Yeah, %.
Yeah, because it has been described where the Drukhari, their weapons are sort of like something out of fantasy or something mythical. It is sort of like magical in the eyes of humans.
Yeah, because it's so far beyond anything that like humans would conceive of or like be able to understand. Like even like the way that Kamara is put together is so like it's just like the webway, but just made big.
Yeah, made very big, and yeah, they're very cool to me, both Drukhari and Eldari.
Yeah.
And I think here's a good question to end the show. I think favorite Legion.
Ooh, that's a tough one actually. Because okay, I think to throw in as well, their Primarch as like a thingy as an influencing factor. I think it has to be Thousand Suns.
Oh, okay.
I'm a big fan of like the Iron Warriors and the Iron Hands and those kind of ones, and like their Primarchs and everything there. But I think the Thousand Suns, because they really just got shafted hard on every count, and they didn't need to be. They came from a world that had a pretty awful like genetic instability when it came to their like Marines in the Legion. Their leader, who by all rights should have been the most like protected and consulted one with the Emperor, was basically just left to do his own shit and left to suffer for it. When Magnus tried to do the right thing and warn the Emperor and accidentally broke the human webway portal and then caused demons to appear on Terra underneath the palace. Like, yeah, that was a big mistake, but he didn't intend to do that. And then when Leman Russ.
Yeah,
Leman Russ. I want to call him Fenris, but like, no, that's not right. When Leman Russ was sent to go and arrest him, and then Horus came like, no, Dad says just kill him. And then the whole burning of Prospero happened. Like, and then after that, when it was like, right, okay, we might have sided with Chaos Bits. We'll be okay. We'll figure it out. And then Armin was like, don't worry, guys. I got a cure for this disease. Boop. And it just turned everyone to dust. Like, they were walking through a field of like rakes, and they just kept standing on all of them everywhere they went. They've had so much bad luck and got forced in such a bad spot that if just for 5 minutes someone stopped and talked to them, it probably would have been fine.
Yeah, people rely on the meme too much that Magnus did nothing wrong. And it's like, even if that's the case, he did nothing right either. Because he has the ego the size of Jupiter.
Yeah, he does.
Because like, no, I am right. Everyone is wrong. Everyone has to understand me because I'm smart, so I'm right. Oh, okay, you're smart, but you don't have wisdom.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be fair, he should have had more support. I mean, that goes for all the Primarchs, actually. He should have had more support from the Emperor. He was a shit dad. So, like, you know, had they all had, like, I mean, he of all of them should have been the one that was warned about chaos. Like, I know he already kind of had that with his upbringing on Prospero, but, like, there still should have been more of like a, hey, you're the most susceptible of anyone to meet some weird shit out there. So this is what's actually going on. Be careful. Probably would have solved a lot of problems.
Then again, I think a character like Lorgar has the most exposure to chaos, yet at the same time, because there are videos who are like share opinions about the character of Lorgar, but I think he always knew some stuff about chaos. Yet also he liked it because there is something about him that is just evil.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. He's not like he wasn't deceived to do anything. No one tricked him or anything. He chose the stuff that he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And because he just didn't care, this does make you an evil person, you know? But
100%.
When it comes to like my favorite Legion and, you know, the Primarch that has a big impact on them when it comes to like, you know, my favorite stuff, it would definitely be Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children.
Ooh.
Yeah, because I really do like the character of Fulgrim because he wants to be the best of the best. He has a sort of perfectionist kind of style, but like Magnus, he has a big ego. So when he doesn't get like the win, or when something doesn't go his way, he takes great offense at that.
Yeah.
Like even when he wants to get criticism from this one artist when it comes to his statues that he's made, even when the guy gave him a little bit of criticism, he took that really personally. He's like, "Oh, okay, I won't make sculptures ever again." And it's like,
yeah,
did you really want criticism or did you want praises?
Yeah, I think, he really does have like a super fragile ego, which, I mean, that's definitely, again, if the Emperor had been a better dad, might have been fixed, but, you know, it is what it is.
And there is a sort of Greek tragedy when it comes to his story, when he, you know, discovers the sword, and the sword sort of manipulates him into doing the stuff that he sort of does. And eventually it brings him to killing his own brother, which when he reflects on it, he never hated his brother. His brother was trying to help him out plenty of times, but the sword sort of like encouraged him, saying, no, he actually means this, even though that was never his intention.
Yeah.
And there's this one theory that someone made where it's like, when the sword started talking to him, someone like Fulgrim, so, you know, a Primarch, so have been like, oh, there's something weird going on. This is like an alien sword or whatever. But what I'm thinking is that because no one else is hearing, you know, voices, and only he's the one hearing voices, that would mean that he's going crazy. But he can't go crazy because he's a Primarch.
Yeah.
And so he sort of like, you know, talks himself out of it, where it's like, no, there's no sword talking to me because that can't happen because no one else can hear it. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
That sort of initial denial that eventually does lead him to the dark road. And because he wants to be a perfectionist, and perfection itself is not a real thing, this does drive him crazy. This drives him to become warped. And I find that to be very interesting for something like Fulgrim. So yeah, Emperor's Children and Fulgrim, they're my favorite.
Oh yeah. And we all know the only wrong choice is the Ultramarines.
Oh no, come on. They're great. Nope.
They're better than they used to be. I'll give them that. I think I got introduced to 40k during the Matt Ward Ultramarines are perfect in every way and no one can ever best them era.
Well, they're perfect because they're Romans. Boom. Nothing can beat Rome.
Except Rome and, you know, barbarians and cultural decline due to mass inefficiencies in handling of resources and peoples, and a little atrocity or two.
Exactly, and some crazed emperors here and there.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that, I think we've reached the end of the show. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we call an end?
Not that I can think of. I guess if you want to check out my stuff on Voice Quills on YouTube and on Twitter at Voice Quills.
Link in description below.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It was so much fun.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and if you all enjoyed this episode, consider giving a like, maybe even subscribe. And with that, I'll see you all next time. Have a good day, everyone.
See yous.
See ya.